Our first symposium is an interdisciplinary symposium on psychedelics and health. What we'll be hearing is how the psychedelic experience actually shapes conceptions of health. Our modern conception of health is very much rooted in certain principles, but are those necessarily the best principles? And how can we sort of shift our thinking into having a more holistic understanding of health? Our first speaker today is coming all the way from California. Maggi Quinlan received her doctorate from the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. She was one of the first recipients of the Kransky Scholarship for the study of entheogens. Her dissertation studied the healing that people experience from terminal and chronic illness through the use of ayahuasca and other entheogens. In her clinical work as a healer and counselor for the last 35 years, she has seen the effect that illness, injury, and disease can have on the transformation of a person's consciousness. She has also studied the impact that work with entheogens can have in facilitating and accelerating that transformation. This has led her to the conclusion that a new field of medicine needs to be established, specifically for the healing of consciousness, and the recognition that entheogens are the medicines for consciousness, which is also the title of her upcoming book. So please put your hands together for Dr. Maggi Quinlan.
Matt, thank you, and thank you for everyone for pulling this together. It's a really profound experience, and the more we do of it, the better it gets. Every problem we face in our world today, whether globally, regionally, personally, and sometimes physically, is a result of our consciousness, how we think, feel, believe, act, and react. All the psychedelic medicines that we are here studying at this conference are entheogens, medicines that open us to the divine within. They are all medicines for consciousness. They are here to help us to expand and heal our consciousness and the problems that are created by not doing so. In the next 20 minutes, I want to make a case that it is imperative to create a new field of medicine that will make medicines for consciousness more appropriately and responsibly available to our world. Our current medical paradigm is allopathic. This is a philosophy of healing that proposes that by treating the symptoms of a disease, whether surgically or pharmaceutically, we will eliminate the disease itself. It views illness, injury, disease, and death as abnormal and only a condition to be fixed. But it does not acknowledge that it can be the effect of these conditions that offer the potential for transformation in our lives. It's also important to recognize that this is only one philosophy of medicine. There are many others: homeopathy, osteopathy, naturopathy, chiropractic, Ayurveda, shamanism, traditional Chinese medicine, just to name a few. And each have their own philosophy, and each have their own approach to healing, and each has a value that is appropriate depending on the client and the condition being treated. And we are here today because we have recognized that there is a need for yet another approach to healing, an approach where consciousness is acknowledged as primary. I propose that medicines for consciousness, psychedelics, entheogens, whichever language you like, offer that new approach to healing because of the expansion of consciousness they create and the effect which that expansion can have on the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual healing of an individual and therefore of our world itself. I'm going to present case studies of people with terminal and chronic illness. This research was conducted in 1999 and 2000 primarily in the Santo Daime Church in Mapiá, Brazil. There is one situation that was not. We'll see how ayahuasca and other entheogens helped each participant to open to the deepest layers of their consciousness that contributed to their illness. And as a result, each of their diseases were cured. I'm going to highlight 3 of those cases along with my own experience. Kathy is a North American woman who had suffered from a severe eating disorder for over 35 years. Her life was a constant, endless cycle of eating for hours and hours and then vomiting it up. In the course of trying to heal herself, she became a therapist. And in spite of a tremendous amount of personal work, her bulimia remained unchanged. Bulimia is one of the few mental health diagnoses that receive equal standing with an allopathic medical diagnosis, and it is very difficult for allopathic medicine to successfully treat. When she took the Daime for the first time, she was shown herself as an 8-year-old with her kitten who scratched her. All the pent-up rage that was in her little body from experiencing paternal incest burst out, and she began hitting the kitten until she bashed in the top of its head and killed it. She describes how this awareness split her into a million pieces, in which she experienced empathy for the kitten, awareness that she had actually killed it, and finally awareness of the deepest belief she held about herself. I am a murderer. The ayahuasca allowed her to relive the emotional impact of that traumatic experience within the presence of love and acceptance. It opened her to compassion and awareness that we all have the ability to inflict harm on others. It allowed for the integration of a part that had been split from her psyche since she was a small child. A part that carried so much guilt, judgment, and shame that no amount of interpersonal work that she had done for 35 years could access it or allowed it to be brought up to conscious awareness. This is the power of medicines for consciousness. As she describes, it was not what had been done to me that was the problem. It was what I was capable of doing back. It was the hate that I had inside of me that I wanted to give back. That was the real horror that I had been puking up all those years. This began her healing of a 35-year eating disorder. She had other levels of work to do, but after only 7 months of working with entheogens, she was cured. Thomas was diagnosed with liver cancer when he was 71 years old. He was a highly educated North American man who came to this healing options when all the allopathic choices acceptable to him were exhausted. The biomedical prognosis for metastatic liver cancer is death. In 1996, he had the right half of his liver removed and declined chemotherapy against medical advice. Prior to his research on his illness, he had never heard of ayahuasca. Thomas only did 4 sessions of ayahuasca, 2 within the Santo Daime tradition and 2 with a person trained in the shamanic tradition of Peru. In his work, he experienced plants, serpents, birds, and jaguar-like animals racing through his system at almost lightning speed to straighten him out, to put him back in order. When he went back to his oncologist 2 weeks after his 4th session, his cancer activity indicator came back not just normal, but below normal. When he explained to his doctor what he had done, the doctor's only rather cynical response was, "Well, you're just one of the lucky few." For Thomas, the shift in consciousness had to do most deeply with his relationship with death, which showed itself in his first session as a deep, dark void. It seemed to be saying, yes, I'm here, I'm part of the system, but don't worry about it, there's nothing to be afraid of. His relationship with time also underwent a profound shift. He acknowledged he was preoccupied with the fear of running out of time before he had accomplished his goals. As he states, in ayahuasca, none of these things matter. Like death, time is always present. Living each day fully means much more than achievement. He also experienced a dramatic shift in his spiritual perspective. A self-professed pragmatist, he had no relationship with the spiritual realm at all. The ayahuasca presented him with an awareness of a force that permeates the entire universe, linking his body with his inner self, the rest of his surroundings, and all of life, the living and the dead, past, present, and future. He also needed to realign his belief to accept the realization that plants can communicate, not just among themselves, but with humans as well. His interpretation of his experience is that his cancer was created by cells that became out of balance, not from anything viral or external, but from something within himself. He experienced the ayahuasca as organically restoring the normal, healthy order of the cells and putting everything back into alignment while purging out the aberrant cells that created the illness. He feels the purge is the most important part of the work because it's the medicine's way of eliminating the physical as well as psychic toxins that are deleterious to the health of our body and mind. It was not luck that cured him. It was a medicine for consciousness. Thomas's story is important not only because of the dramatic reversal of his liver cancer, but because it touches on a key point with working with non-ordinary states of consciousness, or as Stan Grof more accurately refers to them, holotropic states. It is the recognition that all work with holotropic states is a preparation for the final expansion of consciousness that occurs at the death of our physical body. Death is the ultimate non-ordinary state. And I feel this is why we are so terrified of these states. And it's why it's imperative that we develop a deeper knowledge and acceptance of them. Martha is a Brazilian woman who had been involved in the Brazilian political turmoil of the 60s and had been imprisoned and tortured for over 2 years, both physically and psychologically. Martha had been working with the Santo Daime and cannabis for a year when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had a vision in a work telling her about it, and then she went to the allopathic physician and got her diagnosis confirmed. As a result of the events unfolding in her visions, she decided she was not going to work with the allopathic doctor again. She was only going to work with Daime and cannabis to heal her cancer. In her medicine works, she experienced the cancer as a bitterness, a lack of acceptance of the goodness of life, which she interpreted as coming from a chronic seeking of materialism and a separation from her own divine consciousness. During her process of healing, she went through several dramatic experiences of the death of her old life and the rebirth into a new one. Through her medicine work, she was able to access and heal past lives as well as karmic patterns from this lifetime. She saw the continuity of her soul's existence. One evening during a ceremony in which the Daime is prepared, she was too ill to attend and prayed at home alone. At one point, although her house was far from the ceremony, she heard and felt in her body the big hammers that are used to pound the vine, and then she saw the hammers pounding on the tumor in her breast until it was gone. As of 2000, it had been 13 years since she was cured of breast cancer. There are many hundreds of more stories just like this. The medicines opened and healed their consciousness, and the material body followed, releasing the disease. It was not a symptomatic treatment. There were no allopathic medicines involved. My own story is relevant due to a condition being epidemically diagnosed as pathological in too many of our children. In 1997, when I was 50 years old and in my doctoral program, I was diagnosed with severe ADHD. The doctor said he was amazed that I had accomplished as much as I had, given the extreme intensity of the situation. While I was in Mapia, all the symptoms of the ADHD just went off the chart. The hyperactivity in my body and mind got so large. My audio channels were blinking in and out. I had a really hard time hearing, talking, or understanding at all. Knowing that when the energy gets biggest, something is about ready to happen, I just kept asking the medicine to show me what it was about. Finally, in a medicine work, I was shown that ADD, ADHD, and many of the learning disabilities that we are experiencing now are part of a biological and consciousness evolution that is taking place through our neurological system. I was shown a new model of neurological processing. Eventually, if we will learn how to work with this evolution rather than suppress it, it will allow us to expand both the quantity and quality of information that we are able to process at a single time through accessing multiple points of input. In addition to factual information, these points are sensory, spiritual, and energetic receptors that open a more direct capacity for interdimensional and subtle energetic communication. Seeing this has changed my life. This evolutionary process is developing our nervous system into a highly expanded receiver of vibrational waves that will annihilate our current limited model of reality. The end result of this neurological evolution is to move us into a cosmology of unity consciousness, where we will see the we, not just the I. As I was shown by this entheogen, we are not a finished product. We are developing into a new species of human, as different from Homo sapiens as we are from the Neanderthals. These medicines for consciousness are vital tools to help us to align with this evolutionary process and the consciousness that is evolving it. and in so doing offers us the guidance to change our world. We need these medicines to help us to heal from illness, whether physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, societal, or global, and to help us to heal into the next level of evolution as human beings, into a universal consciousness of unity and oneness. As Stan Grof has so clearly stated, the extraordinary healing power of holotropic states has shown that the phenomena occurring during these states represents a critical challenge for current conceptual framework, and thus requires a new understanding of consciousness and of the human psyche in health and disease. And because they are so unique and so powerful, we need to create a new methodology, a new philosophy, a completely new field of medicine. I want to echo Richard Jensen's call for the creation of a field of psychedelic medicine, or as I prefer to call it, entheogenic medicine. As Jensen states, this is a field of medicine that recognizes psychedelics as a necessary and integral aspect of the healing process. Since it deals with the deepest layers of human experience, it reaches the patient in ways allopathic medicine does not. And also because it seeks to produce the deepest harmony possible between body, mind, and spirit. Because it is our dominant medical paradigm, we can utilize the allopathic philosophy to validate the profound efficacy of these medicines. And I want to take a moment to deeply appreciate Rick Doblin at MAPS for his endless, enduring hard work in getting this research funded, and for all the researchers launching and conducting these incredibly important studies. And medicines for consciousness are not only about the treatment or removal of symptoms. They are the medicines for healing of our consciousness, that vast, deep territory that cannot be easily quantified or categorized. Therefore, we have to create a new methodology that honors the individual human qualities contained within the entheogenic experience. And it is imperative to have entheogenic facilitators deeply and experientially trained in the field that each of these individual medicines creates in order to support a suitable environment for the healing to take place in. In conclusion, we need to be able to completely shift our paradigm of how we experience illness, injury, and disease. We need to realign our perspective about their function, and we need to re-examine their role in our life, to see how their presence transforms us in both major and minor ways. And in the process, we need to reconsider and expand our choices for healing these conditions. Psychedelics offer us a powerful choice for this healing. The creation of the field of entheogenic medicine will return psychedelics to their rightful place as medicines for consciousness. Thank you for your time.
I'm interested in the range of experiences and the range of degree of success people experience. Clearly there are many very dramatic cases of successes like the ones you've mentioned, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the range. And I know some people have more subtle successes with this sort of treatment, and I think some people, I've heard some people say that it's a very powerful experience and then it fades and doesn't have lasting effects. And there are questions about why that may be the case and sort of the range of receptivity of different psyches. And if you could speak to some of that.
Yeah, it's a really important point, because whether you're working with breath work or psychedelics, there's an increase in the vibrational field. And that increase in the vibrational field has to be sustained in order for the effects to be lasting. I have worked with clients. I worked with one client who had cancer, and we worked with psilocybin, and she had profound experiences that showed up on a PET scan that her bone cancer had receded dramatically. But because of her own ideas about her death, it shifted again. I believe it was Robert Asiaglo, and I'm sorry, I'm probably killing his name, who states really clearly that you have to sustain a vibrational level, either through continual medicine work or through meditation or for some level of spiritual practice that keeps you engaged with that field. Again, this is because they are not, they're not a drug that you take, have the symptom go away, and then you go on about your life as if nothing happened. You have to understand that these conditions are here to change your life. And part of changing that life is to allow the vibrational field that produced it to become an ongoing part of your life. That's the transformation.
I just wanted to say that I was cured of my depression. It's been over 2 years, and it was ayahuasca that did it. And I haven't taken ayahuasca high dose for all of that time, but I have done like low dose therapy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know of any good precedent for low dose, or it doesn't seem like it's something that's really talked about all that much. So I was wondering if you could maybe discuss low dose ayahuasca methods.
Well, I don't look at it from the perspective of low and high. I look at it more as the continuity of it and what it is that your system needs in order for healing to take place. My experience being an entheogenic facilitator for almost 20 years, and this is echoed by Stan Groff, is that all medicines have their own intelligence. And they bring to our psyche what we are ready and willing to deal with in that moment. And what you experience in your first session is going to be very different than you experience in your 20th session. And it is the progression of that work that creates the levels of healings that are able to happen. When I began working therapeutically with psychedelics, I was manic depressive. I had no intention of healing that. It was not part of it. I just knew that my life had a lot of emotional debris. And in the process of doing that work for as long as I did, that manic depressive condition has just gone away. It was almost a byproduct. But what I wound up seeing is that there was a tremendous amount of repressed anger that was underneath it. And again, what I saw in my 20th session was very different than what I saw in my first session. So it's more the continuity, the sustained understanding of it, and it's why having people who are very, very highly skilled experientially with the medicines are so important, because whoever is diving cannot go any further in their experience than the people who are sitting with them, because the psyche will know it's not safe.
I have adult ADD, and I've always just been kind of disillusioned by the fact that there's not much in America, like not much research going on. It's all like focused on kids. And I went on an ayahuasca retreat in Peru, and it was the most useful thing ever. I did it right before grad school, and the only reason that I am successful in grad school is because that helped me understand how to work within my ADD. And is there any more research like going on between adult ADD and ayahuasca that you know of, other than just people individually working on it?
No, I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of much. I mean, I know that there's a lot of research going on with ADHD and that whole spectrum, but my experience, and I want to acknowledge that I don't follow it, so it may be very limited, is not looking at it as anything other than a condition to be fixed. And my condition was so severe, there was no way to fix it. I had to learn how to work with it. And when I did, it changed my life. So, thank you all.
Maggie, I'm interested in what you were saying about ADHD being a sort of signpost to a new evolutionary step in human brain function. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Like, how do you think that we can integrate these kinds of things, especially in our young people that we're interacting with, rather than, riddling them or whatever, that we trying to medicate it away? What are the strategies in sort of the straight world that we can use to integrate those children into our culture and learn from them?
Well, what I was shown is that there's a new symbolic neurology that is evolving, and as it is now, ours is rather linear. And the symbol that I was shown was more circular. And that rather than trying to get people to stay focused on one thought, rather to learn how to support them in going to these different points on this symbolic circle. What I personally was instructed to do was to learn how to hold two simultaneous thoughts at the same time, which has taken me a lot of meditation in order to learn how to do that. As a technique for supporting people with ADHD, it has to do a lot with going into a more meditative state, whether it's through music or through drumming, but to calm the system enough that attention to what's happening internally can be integrated rather than fought with. Like, I now know that I lose things all the time. And I know it's because of what happens. So rather than going, oh, what's wrong, I just wait and I go, okay, I know I placed that on the table. I know it's there, and I know I can't see it right now. And so I go off and I do something, and I come back, and then I can see it. So a lot of the work is teaching people how to stop fighting with their own neurology and instead learn how to develop a different relationship with it. And in so doing, it relaxes the system. And when the system is relaxed, then there can be the cultivation of new skills of attention. You know, I named it a multiple attention functioning ability, so that we can pay attention, but not in this hyper multitasking world of Silicon Valley, but rather recognizing that we get information from many different levels simultaneously. One of the great examples of this is that in Alaska, they tested, in one of the indigenous communities, they tested all the children, and all the children registered as ADD. Well, this is because when you live in a natural environment, you are always paying attention to what's in front of you, to the ground, to the sky, to the position of the sun, to the wind. And so it's a natural phenomena for people who are living in more natural settings to do this. But in our westernized civilization, we have been taught out of that. And I think, like Stephen has talked about, we have to come back to being able to pay attention at many different levels. And I think that Catherine's presentation on meditation is very important for anybody who is dealing with this kind of neurology.
Recently, there was a death in the ayahuasca community of a young man of 18 years old, Kyle Nolan. And a lot of people are speculating as to why that happened, and I'm not going to talk more about it here. But my concern, actually, because I come from a community where I work with the medicine, is how can we properly prepare people for participating in this kind of experience? And is it possible to prevent a psychiatric episode or something that's going to cause the person more harm than good?
Not everybody is a candidate for working with entheogens. And whoever the facilitator is needs to know how to determine that either psychologically or medically, they just may not be good candidates. And I don't know in this situation if that was done. At another much more deeply esoteric level, and I don't mean to sound at all crass or new age around this, we also have to trust that people's deaths don't happen accidentally, that there is something that's happening in their system. And this came to me at the very beginning of my training 20 years ago, when I asked, what happens if somebody dies in an entheogenic session? And my teacher said, if you have done everything, and you have prepared them, and you have screened them, and you have taken care of them, and their spirit decides to leave, there's nothing you can do to stop that. I have agreements in place to call people back. If I see them leaving, I call them back. I've been blessed in that nobody has made that transition under my care. But I recognize that that is a potentiality because we are dealing with that level. And we have to do, as facilitators, we have to do everything possible to support, to honor the ability to stay in their body and make the transitions while they are alive, so that death is not the only option for that expansion of consciousness.
Maggie, earlier when you were talking about the case histories of the healings in Mapia and Santo Daime, from my limited experience with that particular group, that they would tell you that the power is in the Henarios, not necessarily in the Daime. As researchers, how do you deal with that? I mean, where can you say, like, what is what? You know, was this the ayahuasca? Was this the Henario? Was this the whole experience? And I think the person who is being healed probably doesn't care. I mean, whatever works, right? This whole thing works. But I mean, I think in terms of presenting information to the public, I'm curious as to how you manage that.
The bottom line when you're working with these medicines is that you have to understand that the medicines have an inherent intelligence, and the medicines are guiding the process. And the job of the facilitator is to learn what that medicine does and how to get lined up with it, get behind it, so that you can support the work that the medicine is going to do with people. What the belief system is, either of the person who is ingesting or of the larger dominant culture, is far less relevant than the facilitator's alignment with the intelligence of the medicine. It doesn't matter how it happens. Does it, take the cancer out of the cells, or does it open the people to their beliefs? It doesn't matter.
Right.
You see, that's an allopathic mindset,
Yeah.
and we need to stop looking at how to chop it up and categorize it, because entheogens defy categorization. That's part of the problem, why it has taken so long to get the research started again. So.
Yeah, I just say, I thank you. I really agree with that. I guess I'm just saying, when you're within the confines of these institutions that expect a certain kind of dissection in presenting information, it's just.
That's why I think we need a new field of medicine in
Yeah.
order to really align with these plants and other medicines, not just plants, but all the entheogens.
I'd be interested in further thoughts on integration, and especially regarding psychotherapy and the psychotherapeutic relationship and how that can work towards as another means of integration. And I would just love to hear anybody's thoughts on either integration and that tension within the field of psychology.
Working with people to integrate these expanded states of consciousness is essential. In the mystical experience, there's this expansion. And sometimes it's terrifying, sometimes it's ecstatic. You don't know what it is. It depends on what material is brought up. And so to have the support afterwards to help people to learn how to be available to their own material, not for the purpose, like Neil's saying, of changing them, but for the purpose of discovering who they really are without their wounds determining every action that they take. And that takes time. I talk to my clients about that there's 3 levels of healing. One is learning how to get in touch with and heal the wounding that has covered up your authentic self. But the second level is learning how to live without the wound. And everybody thinks, oh, that would be the easiest part. That's the hardest part. That's the part of really living in this expanded consciousness and functioning from a completely different orientation, instead of the wounded mind saying, you must do this, you are this, that you have to learn how to trust the deeper sense of self. And my experience is that it takes integration with somebody who understands the medicine field in order to do that. To address your question regarding the future of psychotherapy and everything like that, I'd refer you to Stan Grof's book, The Future of Psychology, because he addresses that in depth with no holds barred. And I think that he is, the pioneer in our field who can speak most eloquently to the lack that is taking place in our current field of psychology, and how non-ordinary states of consciousness, and they're not limited to entheogens. People can do breath work, they can do drumming, they can do fasting. There's many different ways to have an expanded state of consciousness, and you have to learn how to integrate that into who you really are, how to come into contact with that essential element of yourself.